All right, I am so excited. I am joined by Mrs. Cobos, live from the Cobos family compound in Canandaigua, and we are going to have a Hamilton geek out session today. Thank you,
Yeah,
Mrs. Cobos.
you're welcome.
Um, we when Hamilton was at its height, 2015, 2016 especially, how often do you think we had conversations about Hamilton? Was it daily? Was it
Oh, all the time. Probably more than politics back then.
Oh man, wasn't that fun when that came out and just caught fire?
Oh
How did
yeah.
you first get into Hamilton?
I think my sister, she said, "Hey, there's this really cool musical. You should listen to it." And it was Thanksgiving. I forget what would it be. When was the first? Would it be 2015?
I think it was 2015 is when it really blew up. Yeah.
Yeah, 2015, and I listened to it all Thanksgiving break, and then I introduced it to my daughter. And then after that, she just went crazy with it, and she became a huge fan. So that's how it
Yeah.
kind of, you know.
I remember seeing the original video of Lin-Manuel Miranda when he just had the one song and he performed for Obama. It was at the very
Oh,
beginning of his presidency. You've seen the
yeah,
video, right? It was like
yeah, I guess
2009. Obama didn't have any gray hair yet. And
so.
I showed that to students. And then I think it was my first year in the high school. Jim Niedermeyer, the former principal, was like, he's working on a musical.
Oh,
And I
get
was like,
out.
no, he isn't.
Yeah,
And they opened off Broadway, of course. And then the next thing you know, they just took over.
yeah, yeah. I remember it was it might have been 2016, either at the end of the Tonys. They offered a whole nother thing of tickets. And at the end of that night, my daughter and I both were on a computer. I was over here on this one and she was on hers, and we couldn't get in, couldn't get in, couldn't get in. Then all of a sudden she's like, "Mom, I'm in." So we bought our tickets. That was like the most exciting time. I think she was a freshman in high school, and we actually that's when we got our tickets to see it on Broadway. Was she was able to get in, and we bought those two tickets, and it was really exciting back then.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I went to see Hamilton in the spring of 2016. I went for Father's Day weekend,
I remember that.
and it was unbelievable. But first of all, for me, the thing I tell people is Hamilton was my guy for a long time, long before the musical.
Yeah,
He's from New York. I went to a Southern school where everybody loves Jefferson, and
yeah,
Hamilton had everything figured out in terms of the way the country was headed. So I've always been a Hamiltonian, and the fact that they just so happened to do a musical on like my favorite historical figure has just been awesome. In
yeah.
fact, I think I told you this. I wanted to name my daughter, and this was long before the musical, Elizabeth Schuyler Harrington,
Oh, I think you. Yeah, I remember that.
because it has the same cadence, right? Hamilton, Harrington.
Yeah,
So
but you didn't do
um,
that.
didn't do that. We went with Macy. We actually used a 64 name
I meant
tournament on our way up from North Carolina to New York one year. And Macy Toddla Harrington is what we went with. And that's perfect name for her. So don't regret it at all. And in hindsight, everybody would have thought I just stole it from the musical, right?
True. Yeah,
Would have been way too popular. But
believed you.
so the book, I have it on my bookshelf. I'm going to
Mhm.
turn around here. Hold on. So this is the book
Yeah,
that famously inspired Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I had read it as well. And
I read it
he
too.
does such a good job, and it's thick, right? I mean,
It's a good read though. It's thick, but
yeah,
it's. I remember reading it when my son was up, just sitting during soccer practices, sitting up at Leo's Bakery, reading it every night. So,
yeah,
yeah, it's a quick read, but
yeah. No, it's so good.
it's
And
good.
there's that famous picture of Miranda reading the book,
Hmm.
sitting in like a beach chair.
Yeah,
And that's what did it for him. That inspired him.
yeah.
Um, So I want to share my screen for a minute here because we were starting to talk about how, hit share here, about that trip that I made.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to, all right, here we go. So I went to see, you can see that okay, right, Mrs.
Yeah.
Cobos?
Hmm.
All right, so hopefully everybody will be able to see these pictures. So I went with Macy for Father's Day weekend in 2016. So 2016, she would have been, so she was 5 at that point. She would have turned 6 in August. So we took the train down. So there's the shirt that I'm wearing right now, the Burr shot first. Now this is going to skip around a little bit, but that's when we went and visited the gravesite. Did you guys visit the gravesite when you went down there?
Yes, we did. Yeah, and I think we were there. It was April 2017. So yeah, we did. Yep.
Yeah. So that's Eliza's grave, which is on the ground right next to Hamilton. We'll show that in a minute. Again, this is just showing you how much of a Hamilton fan I am. I got his bobblehead, which is behind me right now. You've seen me dressed up for Halloween a couple times in my Hamilton costume. There's a view. Eliza's grave is in the bottom there, and you see Alexander Hamilton's big gravesite in the background. I don't remember what year this was, but notice the Hamilton carving. I did that. I'm very proud of that. It's about as artistic as I get.
Yeah.
My favorite plate. I eat off of Alexander Hamilton sometimes. There's Macy when we went to New York City in front of the Home Run Apple. There we are in front of the Richard Rodgers Theater when we actually went to see. And Macy was young. She, in the second act, she was starting to nod off a little bit.
Yeah.
But overall, she held it up. She held up pretty well. And I'm going to take the share off right now. My favorite memory, I think, might be that when King George came out, she booed him. She booed King George III.
Oh, sorry. Like I said, my computer freezes up.
Oh, it's okay.
Booed? That's great.
She booed. Yeah, not too loud.
But the biggest thing about that show is you saw the original cast.
I did. So check this out. My next things to show off here. Here are our programs, the playbills from when we went to see Hamilton. And this, you know how they have the list of the cast. I'm going to hold this right up to the camera.
Look at that.
Lin-Manuel Miranda, Philippa Sue. And this was this was in the last couple months. Leslie Odom Jr., Renee Elise Goldsberry, everybody except for the original King George.
Oh, you didn't see Jonathan Groff?
Didn't see Jonathan Groff, but he went pretty early. He left the show pretty early. So
that's true. I got to tell you, this is a sidebar with Jonathan Groff. My daughter's watching Glee for some reason. He was on Glee. Did you know that? Do you even know what Glee is?
I know what Glee is, yes. My wife actually was into Glee for a while. Wow, did not know that. I'll have to ask Amy if she remembers that. So, my wife Amy refuses to watch any movies, or in this case, a musical where she says people wear costumes.
Really?
Isn't that weird? And she watches, I think I've brought this up on the podcast before, she watches like superhero movies and stuff. But anything like before 1960 where she feels as though they're like dressing up in historical costumes, she's out.
Did she see Hamilton?
She never saw Hamilton. That's why I took Macy. She didn't want to go.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wild.
So anyway, it is wild. But so there's that. And then one more thing to show off. Though Amy may not have gone to see Hamilton with me. She got me this for Christmas a few years ago. And if you look, hold on, everything's backwards on here. There's the signature.
Yeah.
This is signed, autographed by Lin-Manuel Miranda. That hangs out just outside my office. So,
that's really cool.
So when you went to see Hamilton for the first time, what do you remember about that trip, and what did you enjoy the most about seeing it in person?
We had nosebleed seats, but it was still good. So we had.
So did we, yeah.
Where we were sitting, kind of the balcony was coming down and cut off some of the top. So the first time I saw it, we couldn't really see a lot at the top. But we saw the king we saw was one of the original 3. I don't know if you've ever remember when they used to do the little performances on Wednesdays in front of the theater.
Yes, outside the theater while people were waiting in line. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there was one where the 3 original kings did something, and it was Jonathan Groff and the other 2. I forget their names.
Whoever the actors were, yeah.
Yeah, so one of those actors had come back to be the king. So at least we got to see him. He was one of the originals. Was there one before Jonathan Groff? Because
I don't know.
I'm thinking there might have been. That was the one that we saw because he came back to do it. Yeah. And we saw the guy, I tell you, I can't remember these things. Jefferson had just come from Aladdin, and he was the complete opposite of Daveed Diggs. He's a huge guy, but it was really good. But just different than the original cast. So I don't know. It was just really good. The show is good no matter who's in it. So I guess that was kind of a good thing, a good memory.
Yeah. Now you saw it in Rochester as well, too, right?
Yeah, I saw it in Rochester because I had gotten season tickets the year before to get in the queue to get the seats for the show, and then they let us buy extra tickets. So I bought 2 more, so my husband and my sister could go. And my sister is an actress, and everybody knows she's like Barb's mom or whatever. She knew the stage manager.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. We got to talk about that.
Everybody knows that by now. But anyway, one of her friends was the stage manager for this traveling show. So we were able to go behind stage and get a backstage tour, which was really cool. So that's the best.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Walking on the stage, and he told us all the details about how they pick up the show and move it to the next one, and they leap frog. They have 2 different sets, and that was really cool. So yeah.
How did you think the performance in Rochester compared to the performance that you saw on Broadway?
I think the biggest difference was Eliza, and I didn't like the Rochester Eliza. She was a little bit harsher. Other than that, it was good. I think I liked the Rochester Hamilton better than the one that I saw on Broadway, because I think we saw the understudy. We did not see, is it Javier? Was that his name? He was
Javier Ortiz, I believe,
yes,
right?
He was supposed to be. That was during his run, but he wasn't doing the show that day, so we saw the understudy. So I could think that was the biggest thing I remember. The biggest difference was the difference in Eliza. The one in Rochester was a little bit more edgy, I guess.
Yeah. I think that was, I heard some people, several people talk about Eliza and comment on Eliza, though I guess there were 2 Elizas in Rochester too, right? So I think a couple of people I talked to saw the understudy Eliza, but I almost enjoyed the show in Rochester more just because I think I was more relaxed. Not that I was nervous I was just so awestruck when I saw the original cast. Plus I had Macy with me who was still pretty young at the time, and I was trying to make sure she hung in there.
Yeah, we had much better seats for Rochester, so it was neat. We could see.
Yes, we we sat in the front row of the balcony.
Yeah, that's what we did too. Yeah.
Which was perfect. And I was debating for a while on where to sit, and I finally said, you know what? I think the front row of the balcony is going to be perfect, and it was great. And I took my parents. That was really fun
awesome.
To see the show with them.
Mm-hmm.
Had a nice dinner at the Italian place. Geez, I'm totally blanking right now. Up on Spring Street, Panevino. And then we went out to see the show. It was awesome. So, the original cast, the person who impressed me the most in person, and I mean, not, in the recorded performances as well, but in person, Christopher Jackson's voice is just unbelievable. And then Leslie Odom, when he did his signature number,
he's amazing.
The Room Where It Happens, the whole singing, dancing routine was just unbelievable.
Now we saw, I can't remember his name, but he was, oh shoot, see, I told you I would blank out. But he was really, really good at it too, because I was worried about that because Leslie wasn't going to be there in the show, but the person we saw was wonderful. And he, do you remember when they did Live Jesus Christ Superstar a couple years ago with John Legend? And okay, he played Judas in that. So whoever that actor is, that's who we saw on Broadway, and he was really good. I don't remember his name.
No, it's fine. Other than the original cast, I struggle to remember, for whatever reason. I remember that Javier Ortiz was the number 2 Hamilton. It was really cool to see somebody else play Hamilton other than Lin-Manuel Miranda. And I think people have talked about, and Miranda's admitted himself that he doesn't have the greatest voice. I mean, it was still awesome to see him play the part, but it was really fun to see somebody else do it.
Yeah.
So songs. What's your favorite song if you had to pick?
Oh my gosh.
It's hard, right?
Hey, I don't know. I blank out. I like all of them for different reasons, I like My Shot. I like Burn because that's intense and she's angry.
Yep, that's in the second act after Eliza finds out about the affair.
I like The Heartbeat and whatever song that is with their son. I don't want to spoil it.
When Philip dies? Man, you're dark. You're like all the sad, the worst part of the show. I mean, the music's great, but I have a hard time, like if I'm listening to the album, listening to that part. But you got to go through it, and it makes the ending even more powerful. But
yeah,
especially when his son dies, that's hard.
Yeah, I know. It's just neat, though. I mean, the way they did that with the heartbeat and stuff, I always thought that was cool.
Yeah.
So.
I love Yorktown. I just absolutely love Yorktown.
No, you
really don't?
It's okay. It's just not. I mean, you're a history guy. That's probably why you like
Yeah.
it. Yorktown.
I just love the whole, and that one they've had the recording of that they performed at the Oscars.
Yeah, I was
That's
bummed
been
when they did
posted
that.
for a while, and so
I was
I just
hoping
love watching that.
they would have done a different one, and they did Yorktown. So I was like, eh.
Well, it's a good thing that we all have different opinions, right? It'd be boring if we were all the same. The second act, what did I miss with I love the Jefferson stuff.
Oh yeah.
Obviously we talked about the room where it happens.
Yeah.
What's guys, it's been so long. I used to be all over every song by name. Take a break with this at the beginning of Act 2, and all the Schuyler sister stuff too. Satisfied.
Yeah.
The Schuyler sisters are
I
amazing.
like the finale of the first act.
Oh, that's amazing.
Where they're singing, I don't know how many different songs all together. That was just, yeah, I remember that now. It's coming back now.
Yeah,
I love
the last song of Act 1, where there's like 5 different songs going at the same time, right?
Yeah, and how he did that. I got all the songs to work together. That's just so cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely awesome. This makes me want to go back and like listen to the whole album now. So the inspiration for this is a couple days ago. This was now Lin-Manuel Miranda announced that through the Gilder Lehrman Institute, they are opening up a program and a website for free to students across the country during the pandemic. And cool. I just finally had the time a little bit today to go on there and sign up. I'm going to post this along with the podcast on all my class sites and when I post it on some of the different places I post it, but it'll have information on where to go to the website and how to get signed up, but it's all free. And I was just going to show some of this to you for the first time, and that gives me a chance to show everybody. So I'm gonna go back in here to, all right. So it's called Eduham at Home. And this is, if you do a search, if you just do Eduham or Gilder Lehrman, you see up in the search box right there, you'll get to this website and it'll give you an overview of things, and it will give you links to where you need to go. But real quick, this is only about a minute long. Let's take a look at this. I have it set up so it should share with, I'm actually going to take this down from it just to make sure I did this right. All right, hit share. There's a button I got to hit to make sure that we get sound for this. But let's just watch this for about a minute, and I just want everybody to see kind of what this is all about.
Hello, and welcome to the Hamilton Education Program Online. I know we've all been spending a lot of time inside lately and feeling a little disconnected. That's where the beauty of the internet comes in. My friends at the Gilder Lehrman Institute have come up with a way for you to participate in the Hamilton Education Program from your very own creative Batcave. You'll learn how to create pieces based on primary source documents just like I did, and create performances all your own. After you've filmed your own performance pieces using all the tools we have on the site, we'd love for you to submit them here on the Hamilton Education Program website. By submitting your video, you'll not only be joining our Hamilton family, but you'll be opening the door to the virtual room where it happens. Every week, we'll showcase 10 of the best videos on our site, and the Hamilton team will choose one to tweet out and share with the world. Over the coming weeks, I'm home just like you, so I'm looking forward to watching the videos you submit to the Hamilton Education Program website and sharing them with the Hamilton team. Have fun, dive deep, take a shot.
So there you go. So that's kind of an overview of it. And hold on, we're back on screen here, but I'm going to go right back to this and escape, maybe. Trying to get out of the screen. You still with me?
Who, me? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
so I got
cool.
this new laptop because my laptop quit. And all right, let me hit stop share. I'm going to hit the pause button. So here's the link. So we're back on the web page now, Eduham at Home. Click on register here, and it will walk you through the process. It's all free, and it'll ask for, email and some basic information. And then once you do that and you get all signed up, check out some of the stuff that's in here, Mrs. Cobos. You go to the dashboard. There are videos that you can go through and watch that include original performances.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
let's take a look here. Videos. Let me go up here. This should do a little bit. There we go. So clips from the show, student performances, interviews with Lin-Manuel Miranda, Thomas Kail, who is the director, Chernow, who is the author of the book that we just looked at before, right? And then it has profiles of all these different people, interviews with the cast. There is a lot of stuff on here. And then this is what's really cool. There's a student guide and a teacher guide. There's documents, events, timelines, all sorts of stuff that students can read about, look at, and then try and come up with their own performances. And
That's
then
history teacher's dream right there.
oh, this is awesome, right? And then there's the frequently asked questions that talk about how to create the performance piece and how to submit it. And they're gonna pick one each week and actually put it up on Twitter, the best performances that they get from everybody. So it's all free. And I'm going to make it available to all my students. I'm not going to require it or anything, but I know I got some. I'm going to put us back on camera here. I got some big fans. I know this year, like Leanne Yates, for example, is a huge fan.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. She's read books and stuff, and she's really gotten into it.
Yeah.
That whole 7th period class of mine with Leanne and Haley Mitch is a big fan, and Daisy Fernandez. I know in the last few years, there's been a lot of students that have been into it, right? I know you talked with some of your students who are into it.
Yeah. Boy, now I'm blanking out, but I know there's a lot of students that love the show. And then I know the band was doing the Hamilton stuff this year, right?
Oh yeah. Speaking of which.
Nice segue.
Speaking of which, see, you're a pro at this, right? You watched this live, right? I made you come down to watch it?
Yeah.
That's right. So not everybody got a chance to see this, but so the band was performing My Shot. Max McHugh did a great job at the concert. Unfortunately, I couldn't make the concert that night because Macy had her first strings concert. Remember back when we like had events and stuff and we weren't stuck in our houses? But anyway, I came down one morning during first period and I'd been working on My Shot and I performed with the band. Now I had to look at the lyrics. I wasn't good enough. I didn't have everything memorized, but
pretty good though.
Thank you. Here's a clip, and we'll let people judge for themselves here that haven't seen. So, Mr. White took this video. Here we go. There you go. All right. That was fun. That was fun.
Those student faces were fun too.
Oh, you should see Mackenzie Burnett. She was cracking up. She could have been playing clarinet. She was laughing so hard. Another book, by the way, as I continue to share all my Hamilton stuff. I don't know if you've seen this in bookstores before. It's
I
The
think
Revolution.
my daughter has it, I think.
It's so cool, and like all the pages are kind of old school style pages. Like there's Jonathan Goff right there. It has all sorts of notes and about like how he came up with the different lyrics. It's really, really good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, fun stuff. Before I forget, just to shift gears, your sister.
Oh yeah.
Your sister was Barb's mom on Stranger Things.
Stranger Things. Yeah, season 1 and season 2. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your sister. How long has she been acting, and how did she get that gig?
she's been an actress all her life, and then she's also a
Yeah.
speech coach, because you need a second job if you're going to go into that field. So she lives in Atlanta, and they do a lot of productions out of Atlanta. So that was a pretty big gig for her when she got that. She was in a movie a few years ago called Insurgent, I think it was. I don't know. It was like 4 years ago. So every once in a while she gets these gigs, and it was kind of a big one. She was Barb's mom. We didn't realize it would be as popular as it was when it came out. And my brother-in-law's an actor too. Have you heard of Ozark? That show?
Yeah, that's super popular right now, right?
Yeah, he's Jason Bateman's lawyer. So I've only gotten through like the first couple of episodes of the first season, but he was up here visiting a couple years ago, and he had to shoot a scene in our yard where he was actually on the phone with Jason Bateman at the time. And so I have, I don't know, a couple of actors in our family, I guess.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I think we talked about it, but Stranger Things was great, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
I know some of the students have gotten into it. We've had conversations about it, but there's been 3 seasons now. I love the nostalgia back to the 80s.
Oh yeah. Well, that was my time. I mean, that's when I went to high school and college. So my cat is, sorry. I don't know if you can hear my cat, but
I can hear your cat. Yeah. No worries.
But yeah, I love that, the nostalgia part of it. And I don't know, the show is really good. So.
I know some people didn't like the 3rd season as much as the first 2 seasons. They were all different, but I liked each one. I thought the 3rd season was fun. We binge watched it on the 4th of July.
I ended up not finishing the 3rd season. I don't know why. But then my son kind of told me what happens, and it's like, oh, I don't want to finish that. So
yeah,
I have yet to see it. There's a lot of shows that I start, then I don't know, I move on before I finish it.
Yeah, no spoilers on the end of the 3rd season, but my wife was not happy. We'll leave it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. For people who don't know, you had another career before you went into teaching, right?
Yeah, I was an engineer. I worked for Xerox. I was a mechanical engineer. I went to Purdue, and moved up here from Indiana and worked at Xerox for about 10 years before I changed careers. And,
what made you decide to go the teaching route?
I always wanted to be a teacher, and then when I had kids and I wanted more time, and I figured that was a good time to go back to school. And I got tired of sitting in a lot of meetings. It was really boring for me.
Yeah.
So I changed.
So now you get to have Zoom meetings from home during the pandemic, but and you have 2 older kids, right? So it's Katie is at RIT.
Katie is, well, yeah, in theory, Katie's at RIT, freshman, and Ethan is a senior at Canandaigua, and he's going to go to Tufts next year. So hopefully.
Great school. Both great schools.
Yeah, so it's actually, the silver lining. It's been nice having them home. We have, they're on their own schedule. I don't know if you've figured this out yet or not, but it seems like the teenagers are really nocturnal now. And that's very true at this house too. They don't start their day until noon or later. But several times a week, we kind of meet in the living room and we watch movies together, and it's been kind of nice.
Yeah, I made that observation, and thinking back when I was a teenager, and even now, I think if I was left completely on my own, if I didn't have to worry about, all the responsibilities that I have, I think I would probably go to bed 2-ish and get up 10-ish.
See,
that's that would be my normal. Yeah, everybody's different, but
yeah, go to bed early and get up early. But I think I'm the only one.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been tough for obviously the high school kids, a senior in particular, right, to have the senior year.
Yeah. Let me let this cat out real quick. She's driving me nuts. I don't know if you want to
Sure.
pause this, and then I'll get right back.
Sure, we're gonna pause for a second here. But yeah, it's got to be tough on the seniors, right?
Yeah, I think so. And the senior parents too. I mean, I have a senior, but I don't know if it's different with the boys. My son Ethan, he's fine with everything. He's like, yeah, I don't want to go back to school, whatever, because he's kind of mentally ready for Tufts and college, and his work is done. His IB tests, he doesn't have to take his tests in the International Baccalaureate program, so he was very happy about that. But yeah, I think as a senior parent, I have no more band concerts, and don't know about graduation ceremonies, and it's tough, but it is what it
Yeah,
is. It's not like he's the only one going through it. That's the thing. It's like everybody. It's happening to everybody. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and geeking out with me a little bit on
Talking me into it.
on Hamilton. So good to check in with the math department too. We're trying to make our way around to all the different departments, and so we're hitting the math department today as well. So
Sure.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks. All right, we are totally switching gears now, just wrapping up a phenomenal conversation on Hamilton with Mrs. Cobos in the math department. We've checked in with math, obviously social studies and English. Science, baby. We need some science.
Of course.
Sweet. Joining us live from Lyons. I guess you're near the Lyons-Sodus border?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
out in the 315. I
think so. Yes. I'm from New Jersey. I don't even know. But yes. Somewhere up there. Yeah, I'm not too far. Like Sodus High School is not too far. I'm in the Newark district. So I'm in Amish territory. Amish and apples is where I'm at.
Awesome. We're going to talk more about the Amish here in just a little bit. But first of all, how are you holding up during the pandemic? How's your family? How are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing all right. I mean, it's myself, my husband, and my daughter, Sydney. She's 2.5, so that's been fun. So I'm hanging out with the toddler all day, which is cool. We're getting by. We're staying healthy. Yeah.
You and Spaker are kind of in a similar position there, right? What's the age difference between Max and Sid?
It's like 6 months or so, I think.
Yeah.
I think he has like an early spring birthday. She's in the fall. Yeah.
Outstanding.
It's cool.
That's got to be tough.
I'll say she keeps me busy for sure. Yeah.
Well, they need to be entertained all the time and watched, obviously, where I have a 9-year-old, and I mean, she's lonely for other kids to hang out with, certainly. But she can do a lot of self-entertainment, and she's doing her schoolwork and stuff like that. But
right.
I remember what 2.5 was like. It's intense.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough. It's a lot of I need to tag in, tag out, whether it's to grade or just like a mental break sometimes. But it's good. I mean, she's cool. She's learning a lot since she's been home. I mean, she's really bright anyway. But
yeah,
it's been fun. I've been having to just get creative too, following a lot of. I never found myself doing this or thought I would do this, but follow a lot of moms on Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that, just for new ideas, because doing the same puzzles every day, I'm like, all right. But it's been cool. It's been fun. It's really cool having this time, because typically she's in daycare all day, and now I get to be with her all day, and it's nice.
Well, Mrs. Sweet, you teach biology, and what's interesting, I first met you as Ms. Janega, and we were both part of the same incoming class of new teachers.
I know.
And we both started off in the middle school.
Yes, we did. Yeah, I was there a little longer than you, but.
Yeah. I've even. How many? Is this year 7 for us? Is that what it is?
I think it's 7. Yeah. Year 7. That's.
I don't know about you, but it seems like it's gone by pretty quickly.
I think so. I can't believe it. I know there are times where it's funny. I kind of feel like we're one of the veterans, but at the same time, we've only been there 7 years.
Yeah.
But I like it. Yeah. I don't know.
How long have you been in high school now?
I was going to say, this is probably my 3rd or 4th year in the high school. I think this is my 4th. I had a year where I started in the middle school and then transitioned to the high school about a month in, which was interesting. But yeah. So, but I like it. Everywhere outside of Red Jacket, I taught high school. So.
You and I are similar like that too, yeah.
Yeah, and so the opportunity came, that's what happened. I jumped on it.
I was originally hired, I'm sure you don't remember all this, but I was hired for a part-time position, eventually.
I know that.
Yeah. I was originally hired for the 9th grade job that was part-time, Mr. Bot's job.
Right, okay.
But then the middle school teacher left after they had hired me for that part-time job, so they offered me the full-time 8th grade job, because I never would have even applied for a middle school job. So I was like, all right, 8th grade, it's U.S. history. how different is it from ninth grade, right? Teaching content anyway. So now it was a great class. That was the Olivia Spencer
Sure.
class with Elliot English and all those guys, Jack Schneider. I could go on and on. So it was a great class to have as eighth graders, and then I got them again in 11th grade, which was really cool.
That's been cool, right? Like so same thing. I started with the middle schoolers, moved to the high school, and then had them again. So my AP group right now, this is the third time I'm teaching them, which is really cool. It's just like there isn't any of that intro period at the beginning of the year where, you kind of have to like feel each other out, you know what I mean? Just it's awesome, just kind of jump right in. And so that's been cool. And then my sophomores I have right now, they're the group I had for a little bit in the fall. So it was nice getting to see them this year. And I would have said like, oh, it would have been cool having them for a whole year, except here we are. And that didn't happen. Sorry, guys.
The upper end academically of that class that I was talking about, the 1 year I was in the middle school, when I had them in AP, I think it was 13 of them in my AP US history class, and every single one of them got a 3, 4, or 5, including 3 5s, I think.
Wow.
So I put I started putting, I don't know if you've seen it in my room before, but I put like the retired numbers up on the wall if they get a 5 on the AP exam. So
cool.
Anybody who's gotten a 5, I put their name up there in the year that they did it. But for that class, I put like their whole class with all their names because they all got, as a Hall of Fame class, a 3, 4, or 5. But
that's a cool idea.
So yeah, I'm glad I did the 1 year in the middle school, but I teach juniors. That's what I tell people. That's what I do. I teach juniors.
Yeah.
I think junior year is the best year because they're the most focused before they, check out their senior year, and the most mature, more mature than the freshmen and the sophomores. So
I agree. I've taught juniors before, and I'd say they're pretty cool. I think all the grades are different in their own way, but I agree as far as what you mentioned. There's maturity there, and there's focus there, and they're starting to see that there's an end in sight, and some of them are kind of having that realization, like, oh, there's an end in sight. I got to do something. So they're a cool group to have.
So what has it been like as a science teacher, and especially a biology teacher, kind of watching everything that's going on, and obviously, being part of the quarantine and the whole situation? Any observations or thoughts on it?
I find myself yelling at the TV a lot. Like, what do you mean? Like, no. I don't know how political you want to get as far as some things that occurred last night, but I do find myself yelling at the TV a lot.
Without mentioning any names, please do not ingest any cleaning supplies or disinfectants.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I do find myself that, or certain states that want to open up. But then at the same time, like this morning, my husband flagged me down because there was some doctor speaking about the structure of the virus, and he was mentioning like RNA and lipids, and he was like, Dad, come here, you gotta see this. And of course he knew that I'd be into it. So it's been fascinating. I mean, I actually teach the immune system in December of my living environment group. I show the movie Contagion and Outbreak right before the holidays. So it is unreal, the similar, especially with Contagion. Outbreak's a little out there, but like Contagion, it's just so similar. It is.
So I haven't seen Contagion, and a couple of my AP students were telling me about it. What are a couple of the similarities that you see, and then maybe where it kind of deviates?
Starting off, it's a respiratory illness. It's just how quickly it spreads, the role of whether it's the CDC or the role of the president going on. I mean, they have to do this whole stuff, quarantine as well. But also, I don't know, there's aspects of the movie where people are rioting, and there's a lot of like political distress, and people like robbing stores, and of course they're looting, and there's, we haven't really seen so much of that yet. I know it's happening, but think of like the toilet paper crisis, like that is happening in the movie. It's happening now. And the race to get a vaccine out. The movie goes from everything from the first infection all the way to vaccines coming out. And so it kind of highlights like what is still yet to come, and how are we going to get these vaccines out. And, we have this father, and he's got his daughter, and he's not letting his daughter leave the house. I mean, that's happening everywhere in America right now, you know, and so there's just a lot of similarities. It is one of those, you have to watch it just because it's almost uncanny, the similarities. I mean, they did a really good job of depicting what a real pandemic would look like, and here we are in the middle of one. It's good.
So, yeah, I definitely want to check it out, though. Part of me is kind of nervous to check it out. Not exactly distracting you from the events at hand, right? You're supposed to escape when you watch a movie, but I know. Watch it
it's actually maybe a really bad idea. Now that I think about it.
No, I definitely want to see it at one point, though. So a way I heard it described is, you know, kind of a three-headed approach or a tripod of things that we need to worry about in terms of testing. We know that testing is a big factor, not just figuring out who has the virus currently, but also the antibody test who's already had it. We'll get to that in a minute. Yeah. But then obviously a vaccine is the holy grail, right? But then also effective treatments, whether it's injecting somebody with platelets or coming up with medications, or not platelets, plasma.
Plasma.
Yeah. Or coming up with medications and other treatments that may prove to be effective. So let's start with the testing, right? Talk about the antibody test and why that's so important.
Right. So the way a virus works, right? I mean, just kind of want to go a little background, right? So when you have some kind of pathogen infection, what recognizes the pathogens, whether it's a bacteria or a virus, and ultimately kills it, is an antibody, right? So when you get sick from a virus, a cold, your body creates antibodies to mark it for destruction from other white blood cells. So, and then also enables your cells to be able to remember that virus or flu, or any kind of virus. But when you get a vaccine, similar things happen in the sense that you're exposed to this virus, your body creates the antibodies to be able to recognize and fight off, you know, that virus if you actually were to get exposed, right? So if people have these antibodies, it means that we can use their plasma to be able to give to people, kind of as like a preliminary vaccination almost. Yeah. It will help people who are unable to fight it currently, but B, also help people fight it off if they were to get exposed. So it's huge. It's quicker than developing a vaccine. So because it's already there, it's biologically produced. There would be some issues, for example, like blood types. There's a couple other issues associated with it, but ultimately it's the best solution we have right now. But like you said, not everyone is going to have antibodies, so readily to be able to get their plasma donated. Yeah. What were the statistics you found? Like only 20% of people have them?
Yes. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And so New York had I'm on my wrong, let me get to the right spot here. Right here. Okay. So New York had testing that took place. In fact, they were taking people's blood samples at the East Avenue Wegmans in Rochester. So they tried to get a distribution from people all across the state. Total of 3,000 antibody samples from 40 locations in 19 different counties. And what they found was that New York City, about 20% or 1 in 5, 21.2% to be exact, had the antibodies. Long Island, also really high, 16.7%. Westchester, which of course is just north of the city, and Rockland counties, 11.7%. And then the rest of the state, which would include us, of course, is 3.6%. Were you surprised by any of those numbers?
Not in particular. I mean, if you look at New York City, they're going to have the higher antibodies just because they've had a higher infection rate. So that makes sense. Is it possible for you to be immune and have natural antibodies? It is rare. I mean, we are humans as a result of sexual reproduction, mutations, and so on. There could be some variation. Maybe some people have antibodies without actually having the infection. But for the most part, these people who have antibodies had COVID and fought it successfully, and therefore have the antibodies in their plasma. So it makes sense that the higher antibody, rate kind of goes in line with the higher infection rate. That makes sense.
What's really interesting about COVID is what seems to be a pretty significant number of people who get it and either have very mild symptoms or are asymptomatic, meaning they don't have any symptoms, right?
Right.
And it's kind of a double-edged sword because, I mean, it's good that those people haven't gotten really ill,
Right.
but those people then can transmit the disease without even realizing it.
Sure. Yeah, they're still contagious. They're still contagious, exactly. It could still be in their droplets. It could still be in their air. It could still spread to whether your home or work environment. Yeah. It's scary.
Yeah. So I've talked about it before in the pod, but my wife's a physician, so she hears the latest on the medical front. I don't know how much you've heard about this too. That it seems as though the real concern is on surfaces. That this virus really seems to linger on surfaces, particularly like hard metal surfaces like doorknobs and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's actually one of my favorite words is fomites. So fomites is the concept by which pathogens, particular viruses, stick to surfaces, right? So there's two ways to get this virus is from, inhaling someone else's droplets in the air or from, exchange, physically from person to person, but the other one is from surfaces, right? And that concept is called fomites. But so the outside of the virus is lipids, is fat. So it's kind of oily, actually. It's that enables it to stick to surfaces so well. In particular,
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, in particular, like doorknobs, like metal surfaces, things that are more slick. All right, it's gonna stick to those surfaces better. And yeah, it's kind of like sticky.
Yeah. So it has a really high rate. Oh, what's the term that my wife used with it? But there's a lot of droplets and particles too, in terms of that the virus is it's out there in big bunches. I can't think of the term right now, but
yeah, I don't know. Transmission rate. I'm not sure.
Rate. I'll think of it at some point, but yeah, fascinating. So the testing is going to be big. Not only knowing who's going to have it and knowing the antibody test, but then the vaccine is ultimately what we're looking for.
Right.
But then what about treatments? And I know there's been again, not to get back into politics, but hydrochloroquine, I can't even say it. What's the hydrochloroquine or something like that?
Chloroquine, maybe. Quinine. Yeah. I'm not even quite sure, to be honest. But I want to say that's a strong antibacterial or antibiotic, which again,
I think it was a combination of an antibiotic and anti-malaria drug, right?
Okay. So again, these are all different pathogens. I mean, a bacteria and malaria is called.
I think it is.
There you go. And malaria is caused by a type of protist, and this is a virus. So they're all different. They all have different, membranes or protein coatings and different antigens and proteins. So it's the fact that this is even being considered is odd. But as far as a treatment goes, you have to remember that. As far as treating a viral infection goes, you can slow down the infection. That's the best thing is actually once it's inside your cells. So of course, say there's no vaccine and it's actually able to get inside your cells. There's a way of maybe slowing it down because what viruses do is they take over your cells and they actually make your cells make more viruses, which will then go and attack other cells.
They take over the nucleus and then it starts replicating itself, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, COVID is it's an RNA virus, so it can actually bypass the nucleus completely. It can just inject the RNA. It can make the ribosomes just make more proteins, make more viruses. Bam! It doesn't even have to go into the nucleus. Whereas there are some viruses that are DNA based and some that are RNA based. So this one's RNA based, so it doesn't even have to go into the nucleus. You can just inject the RNA, and again, it kind of takes over your ribosomes to make proteins, to make virus proteins, to make more viruses. And so if we can slow down that, that's what any kind of antiviral would do, right? Is slow that rate. Because, and that's really it. I mean, ultimately, that's the best thing that can help as far as a viral infection goes. And then eventually, if we can at least slow it down to the point where your body has time to make the antibodies, that's the best solution. So I guess it's important to know, I'm kind of backtracking here, that a treatment won't kill the virus.
Yeah.
A treatment will slow down the viral infection to the point where your body will make antibodies. That's really what I'm trying to say is.
And help alleviate the symptoms so you don't get.
Right. So, so when your body gets exposed to this viruses, then you have this inflammatory response and that inflammatory response is what's hurting people, is what's causing the coughing and the kidney damage and the liver damage and so on. It's actually a response to our own inflammatory proteins.
Yeah.
So that's an issue too. Yeah. So it slows down the symptoms also.
Yeah. So yeah, the hydroxychloroquine is the name of the drug that was being touted by the president. Though some of the preliminary results on that have actually shown that people didn't necessarily show improvement from that, and actually, there's concerns about that possibly hurting some other systems in the body, like cardiovascular.
Yep. Kidney damage, liver damage. Yep.
Kidney damage, getting in. What's the outer part of the heart that they worry about the infection?
Pericardium.
Pericardial
Yeah.
infection.
Okay.
So
yeah.
So there's the concern on that front, but they continue to try and experiment with that type of stuff. The other thing I was going to mention, just looking at unique aspects of this virus from a medical and scientific standpoint, I guess there's more stuff coming out on how we know that obviously if you have pre-existing conditions or if you're older, you're more vulnerable. But there have been some cases of, particularly with younger men, who are having strokes. Right. And we don't know why necessarily, right? And that
right. No, or blood clotting I'm seeing is also a huge thing right now.
Yeah,
also.
Which causes a stroke. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what that in particular is about. I do know that that the virus does lower your platelet activity, right? But that would actually cause for your blood to be thinner. So there must be some other type of clotting factor that the virus is interfering with.
Yeah. And that's just a matter of, obviously, the more cases we have, the more observations that doctors make, the more data that they compile on what happens to people, the more we're going to know. It's interesting. It seems as though some of the earliest cases in the United States were earlier than we thought they were, right? We thought the first big outbreak was in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State at that nursing home. But now they're saying as early as, I want to say maybe even January in California.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's kind of resetting the timetable and everything.
Yeah, I saw the same thing. It makes you wonder too, I mean, even though I was sick a few days prior to us leaving, it makes you starting to think about man, did I have it? It's crazy. Yeah.
Well, I've talked about it on the podcast. My wife was sick as she's ever been, and she went into the hospital with pneumonia. She was positive for influenza A, but as they've compiled statistics, there's about a 20% co-infection rate. So it's very possible she also had COVID. By the time they tested her, it was like a month. She was still dealing with some complications from the pneumonia, but she had been sick for about a month and a half at that point. So it came back negative, but we still think there's a chance she may have had it.
Sure. Yeah.
Some other things, like she remembers losing taste a little bit. And I know that people have talked about losing taste and smell, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah. And everything else fits with the cough and all the different things that she had. So there's some speculation on this front. I was going to bring this up to you. So blood type, there's no evidence that, there's no scientifically vetted studies that have been done, but there's some speculation that blood type could play a role. And this is where, from an anecdotal standpoint, so what the speculation is saying is that people who have blood type A may be more susceptible, and people who have O are the most resistant. And why I say that anecdotally this kind of fits for my family is that Amy, my wife, who we think may have had it, is blood type A. And both Macy and I, who obviously, if Amy did have it, we would have been exposed, and neither one of us came close to getting sick. We're both O blood type. So again, it could just be coincidence, and we don't know if Amy had it, and I don't know if blood type plays a role, but just kind of interesting.
Yeah, right? That is interesting. Well, I wrote it down because, so if she's A blood type, then she's got antibodies for B. And I'm trying to think about how that makes any sense. I'm not sure. But then if you're O blood type, you would also have B antibodies. So I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know. I mean,
so what we did? So we knew Amy was A blood type. So I couldn't remember what blood type I was, and Macy didn't know. We didn't know what type she was. So we ordered, and we did this for Macy's science lesson. We ordered a mail to your house blood testing kit, and we all tested our blood. It was really cool.
That is really cool. Did you put little drops on? And
yeah. There's four. So there's the A box, the B box, and the O box, and then there was one more. Yeah.
The RH one for plus
The
and
RH
minus.
positive,
probably?
negative. Yeah. 'Cause we found out
Yeah,
that
yeah.
too. Yeah.
Okay, that's so cool. Yeah, and so the blood like clumps together, and that's just a positive sign.
So if it
That's cool.
if it coagulates, then you know that it's present, right? Those antigens are present.
Yep.
It was really cool. It was really cool. Do you guys get into blood type much in either Regents Bio or AB
I
Bio?
was going to say, the day we left, that Thursday, I did a simulation on blood typing with synthetic blood, and we did the same exact thing. Yeah, I talk about it in genetics a little bit. So I talk about it with the immune system, and talk about the relationship of antigens, antibodies, and like why it's important if you were to get like an organ donated to you, why it would need to be the same, because we go into antibody antigen relationship. But I also go into it in genetics when we talk about like little Punnett square and like, you know, mom and dad have this blood type and this blood type, what could their kid be, and so on. So I do it twice. Yeah. And then APC is a little bit in genetics also. Same thing. We go to multiple alleles. Yeah. Get those Punnett squares out.
I love the genetics. I've talked with you a little bit before about how much I love science, and in particular biology. The thing that kept me from being a science teacher and why I chose social studies is I don't trust myself in a lab. I was never as good in the lab. I think it's the same reason I don't think I'm a great cook, because I'm like, I can learn concepts, and I like nice 2-dimensional diagrams, and like this is here, that's there.
Yeah.
But then when I would get in and would be like, you know, dissecting stuff, and it's like 3-dimensional, and I'm like, is this what it's supposed to look like? It's like with cooking. Is this how much I'm supposed to add?
It's a lot. Yeah. It's a bit of a learning curve. Like when I first started teaching, I felt that way. I was like, what am I doing? And now, now either you roll with it, or, you know, and things work out. And if they don't, they don't. And every year I just roll in really cool labs with my AP class. And every year I still cross my fingers that it works out well. And it does. So far, so good. But every year I'm still like, ooh. Yeah. One of my favorite ones is transformation, where we actually alter some E. coli with jellyfish genes. So we actually make the E. coli glow in the dark, which is pretty cool. And so it's the coolest lab we do all year. So far it works. It hasn't failed yet.
Is that what CRISPR is all about? You know what CRISPR is?
Yeah. So CRISPR is actually it's kind of like using a virus. So, you know, you mentioned, we kind of talked about how viruses can inject their DNA or RNA into a cell. So what we're doing with CRISPR is we are able to locate specific genes so, you know, hypothetically, I know a person or an infant more or less who's born with cystic fibrosis, right? So what we can do is inject them with these viruses that go into their cells, locate the gene for cystic fibrosis, and they can actually program this virus with enzymes to actually remove that gene. And we've been able to do this successfully, of course, in amazing trials. We believe that cystic fibrosis is one of the genetic diseases we can probably eradicate because of CRISPR. We think that if we catch it early enough.
Or what about like type 1 diabetes, right? Like the insulin, you go through it and you can mess with the gene that produces insulin.
Probably. I don't see why not. I mean, we could really use it to create like superhumans if you wanted to.
Wow, that's the dangerous line. That's when we start to get into social studies and morality and all sorts of fun, right? Yeah.
Well, have you ever seen the movie Gattaca? Have you ever seen that one?
No.
Oh my gosh. So that's the same concept by which it takes place in the future of a world where people are genetically engineered to be elite, and so I mean, your job, your social life, everything is based on how pure and how amazing, elite, if you will, your DNA is. And so then there's these people who are reproduced from like sex reproduction and so on, and they're like looked down upon because they are less than, because they're not engineered. It's a cool movie.
Yeah, and there's a lot of crossover with, I love where there's intersections of science and social studies. And in fact, I've always talked about at some point in some world, I'd love to do a history of science class and co-teach it with a science teacher, especially when you get back into some of the old school scientists from like the scientific revolution, 17 and 1800s, especially when they were working with mercury, because it made them all lose their minds.
Oh my God. I know.
Right? And they all had like crazy affairs. And was it Tycho Brahe like lost his nose? Like there's great stories with scientists.
I know. I always like to go into Rosalind Franklin when I talk about DNA and how she was completely shafted by Watson and Crick and Maurice Wilkins, and they got all the credit, and then she died, got cancer because of X-ray diffraction and so on. And I always talk about her. She's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then Henrietta Lacks is another fascinating story. The book that was it, The Real Life of Henrietta Lacks or something like that.
Immortal Life.
The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. That's a fascinating story. So basically, using her cells in cancer research without the family's permission, and years later, the family getting involved in the whole. It's a fascinating story.
So again, we still test on HeLa cells to this day. I can order HeLa cells in my biomanuals if I wanted to. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
It goes back to this woman who just had this. It was like a crazy type of cancer tumor, right?
Yep. So that for whatever reason it was proliferating, dividing in a petri dish, which they couldn't get to do. Still can't really do that well, but her cells are.
You know, you mentioned the genetic engineering, and obviously we're talking about doing at a biological, DNA level, molecular level. But then if you just talk about, going back in the Nazis, for example, right, the idea of eugenics, of just not letting people reproduce that were seen as inferior, whether it's races or characteristics or, which is obviously a whole another issue on a whole nother disturbing level, but, or Supreme Court case, which I never really have time to get into with my students, but Buck v. Bell. You ever heard of Buck v. Bell? That's the one about forced sterilization. Like the issue of should people with developmental disabilities and things like that, like how much say should they have over the sterilization and reproduction process? That's a very, very famous Supreme Court case. So love when social studies and science intersect.
That's awesome.
So tell me about your Amish neighbor. You got an Amish neighbor?
I do. So Wendy, I'll take you out for a tour in just a moment. But yes, I have Amish neighbors. So there's a 100-acre Amish farm, right? Like literally, I'm like a little 2-3 acre blip in their property, basically. And they don't really produce like a dominant crop or anything. I think they just kind of sustain their own little family. They have 13 kids. 13, but most of them live in Michigan. Wow. Yeah, here they have 6 boys here. They have other daughters that still live there in Michigan and married off to other families. But yes, they have 6 boys. Their eldest is actually got married last year, but he's probably 16. And then it goes all the way down to a toddler. Yeah, so those are my neighbors. And they're pretty cool. And so right now, it's springtime, so they're getting.
Oh, I've lost your audio. Hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, you're back.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Okay, so every springtime, right? They plant their crops, and so right now they're doing
moving. All right.
Yeah, so they crop rotate every spring, right? So, and what that means is, right? So one year they might grow corn in the same place that they might grow soy the next year, and they do that because these plants take up different nutrients. One might want more phosphorus, one might want more potassium or something. And so they don't want to get too many nutrients taken out of their soil, so they rotate their crops, right? Well, every now and then they need to replenish the nutrients in their soil. Yeah. And so this year, they just every couple of years, but this year they got a delivery of chicken poop to reestablish their nutrient pile. So nutrients, if you will. And I don't know how well.
Oh, this is great. I am I feel like I am in Wayne County right now. I'm on the farm. Yes. I can almost smell the chicken poop.
Yeah, on really. On a hot day. You certainly can. So I don't know how well you can actually see it, but there is
actually see pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of white pile. The white is from feathers.
Oh wow!
So that is a gigantic pile of chicken poop, and this is my house. That's my house.
Oh, your house is awesome. It's I love it.
There's the poop. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah. It was built in 1825.
I love your porch.
Ew, thanks.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love your house.
Thanks so much. I have this gigantic tree. Can you see that? So the house is called the Maplewood. It was built in 1825, and I want to say that tree is, it's got to be at least 200 years old.
Wait,
Yeah.
did you say your house is named Maplewood?
My house is named the Maplewood.
That's awesome.
I don't
That's like
I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
It just has a name. Yeah.
That makes
But
you
I was built in.
important. Like
I know.
Teddy Roosevelt had, names for his houses and stuff. Like rich people, name their houses. I love it.
Thanks. Yeah. So yeah, it was built in 1825, and this is my tree. I mean, just also like look at. I mean, can you figure out how big that is?
It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah. So this is my life, man. Hanging out in Wayne County. Yeah. This is what I got.
Yeah.
These are my neighbors. That's actually our little barn. We don't keep much in
Outstanding.
there.
So I grew up in Naples, and my parents still live in the same house I grew up in. And there is an oak tree in the front yard of my house in Naples that's still there. It's massive. There's a plaque in front of it. They gave it a plaque for the bicentennial. They think that tree's been there since like before George Washington was born.
Oh, no way. Oh, that's cool.
It is so old. And if anybody who knows Naples well knows exactly the tree and the house that I'm talking about. It's right next to the high school and across from the town hall. But that tree you just showed me can rival it. It's an oak tree that's in my parents' yard.
Very cool. Oh, like so you get lots of acorns every year?
Oh, let me tell you about raking leaves growing up. It was a multi weekend operation.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Well, we have the same issue, but with leaves. We get the samaras every like springtime. They're going to be coming soon. That's like it's like tree fruit. Those little helicopters.
Oh yeah.
So those are coming soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is actually a silver maple, though it's not a sugar maple. So I can't tap it or anything like that. But
bummer.
I know.
Well, I love your farmhouse.
So
we were looking at houses before we decided to settle in Brighton, and we absolutely love where we are in Brighton. Some people from Red Jacket might know the house that I'm talking about here that we looked at in Farmington near Pumpkin Hook. It's on the corner of Hook Road and can't remember, is it Alan Paget or anyway? It's an old farm. It was the home. There's a state historic site plaque. It was the Hathaway house. It was Isaac and I think Carol Hathaway, and the guy was the president of the Western New York Anti-Slavery Society that lived in that house. And this house went back even older than yours. It was like 18 teens. And it was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And
that's pretty cool. Yeah.
They also had this giant kickboard and like a little soccer field set up. It was really neat property. There's a silo and some older buildings and stuff on it. So, and just an absolutely beautiful farmhouse with a great kitchen. But cool. Ultimately we went with our place here in Brighton, but I love farmhouses.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had the opposite experience. I grew up in the suburbs of New Jersey, right? So I never thought I'd be living in a farmhouse in Wayne County, but no, we like it too. We like the land. The amenities of society they're still close. I know Wegmans.
Yeah.
I got a Wegmans too, so it's not too bad. Sorry,
awesome.
It's cold. I had to go inside.
But. No, don't blame you. We appreciate the tour.
But yeah.
All right. Well, this has been great.
So much. Yeah, it's been cool. I appreciate it.
Yeah, checking in with the science department and reliving our voyage through the years at Red Jacket. Well, hope you and your family stay safe, stay entertained, have fun chasing sit around.
I will. Thanks.
And hopefully,
I like it when Macy pops in. It's awesome.
definitely. And hopefully, at some point, we'll all be back at Red Jacket, actually teaching inside our classrooms. So,
I know. I look forward to that. Yeah.
Thanks
for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I was just going to say, I went into school the other day because my laptop quit. I have a new laptop now, thanks to Mrs. Bailey, who's also a regular listener to and watcher of the podcast. She's a big fan. She always emails me. She hooked me up with a beautiful new laptop, but I went into my classroom so I could download everything on it and get everything up to date with the network. And I got a little emotional when I went into my classroom because it was just like everything was suspended in time.
Yes.
I
was same position here. The day of the parade, I went in to feed my fish, and I went in and same thing. I got a little teary-eyed too.
I still had the
Yeah.
up-to-date standings in the primary, the Democratic primaries and caucuses, which that was all going on in the midst of when the pandemic hit, which is this unbelievable story of Joe Biden, who looked like he was done, right? And Bernie Sanders was going to be the nominee, and then here we are, and Biden's is going to be the nominee. So, and I still have that stuff up on the board. So just absolutely crazy. But looking forward to getting back in our classrooms, no doubt.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Mrs. Sweet. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's going to wrap it up. Thanks to Mrs. Cobos and to Mrs. Sweet for a great episode this week. And good to be back on here. Sorry, it's been a couple weeks since we did our last podcast, but this one was a lot of fun. All right, everybody, stay safe, stay healthy. We'll talk to you soon.